Tonight, we're going to explore the ancient mystery of Pandora, the first woman shaped by the gods of Olympus, and the question that has echoed through thousands of years: why would Zeus, the ruler of heaven and earth, create a being whose arrival would forever change the fate of humanity as the night grows quiet? Let yourself wander into the world of marble temples, sacred fires, and forgotten myths. If you enjoy these peaceful journeys through ancient history and mythology, like the video and subscribe. And share your location and local time in the comments so others can imagine this story unfolding beneath the same sky. You step into a world older than memory, a world where mountains carried the voices of gods and where the sea was believed to breathe with divine power. Before Pandora ever opened the mysterious vessel that would transform human existence, the universe of Greek mythology had already passed through ages of darkness, rebellion, and renewal. The Titans had ruled before the Olympian gods, and the earth had witnessed a great struggle between the old generation and the new. From the highest peaks of Olympus to the deepest shadows of Tartarus, the balance of creation had been rewritten. You can almost feel the cold mountain wind moving through the rocky paths beneath Mount Olympus. The sky above is filled with countless stars, and below, small villages rest quietly beside olive groves and distant shores. In ancient Greek imagination, this was not merely a landscape. Every river, forest, and storm carried a presence. The world was alive with unseen forces, and humanity existed between the kindness and the anger of the divine. After Zeus defeated the Titans and claimed his throne, a new order began. The thunder god became the guardian of cosmic balance, the one who decided the boundaries between gods and mortals. Yet victory did not erase every threat. The old Titan spirit still remained, and among those who carried it was Prometheus, a figure whose name would become forever connected with humanity. Prometheus was different from many of his fellow Titans. While others sought power, he looked toward the fragile creatures living upon the earth. Ancient traditions describe humans as weak compared with the mighty animals around them. They had no sharp claws, no powerful wings, and no thick fur to protect them from the cold. They lived beneath the endless sky, vulnerable to storms, darkness, and hunger. You can picture these early humans gathering around simple fires, looking toward the heavens, and wondering why the gods possessed such incredible gifts while mortals struggled in silence. According to the myths preserved by ancient poets, Prometheus felt compassion for them. He saw potential where others saw weakness. He believed humans could learn, create, and build a future beyond their fragile beginnings. But compassion would soon place him against Zeus himself. The relationship between Zeus and Prometheus was complicated. They were not simply enemies from the beginning. Some ancient traditions suggest that Prometheus even helped Zeus during the Great War against the Titans. Yet after the victory, their visions for the world began to separate. Zeus wanted order, obedience, and respect for divine authority. Prometheus believed humans deserved knowledge and the ability to shape their own destiny. The first warning appeared like a shadow moving across the ancient world. The gods had established boundaries, and crossing them carried consequences. Greek audiences understood this deeply. The concept of hubris, the dangerous pride of reaching beyond one's place, was one of the central ideas woven through their myths. A mortal who challenged the gods risked destruction, but a god who ignored balance could also bring suffering. The tension between Zeus and Prometheus grew quietly, like a distant storm gathering beyond the horizon. Then came the moment that changed everything. Prometheus looked upon humanity and decided that their greatest weakness could no longer remain. in the sacred stories. He took the divine fire that belonged to the gods and gave it to mortals. Fire was more than warmth. It was civilization itself. It allowed humans to cook food, shape metal, create tools, gather together, and tell stories beneath the night sky. You can imagine the first flames appearing in the darkness, glowing against human faces filled with wonder. For a brief moment, humanity held a piece of something that once belonged only to Olympus. But Zeus saw this gift differently. To him, fire represented more than comfort. It represented a boundary crossed. A mortal world that gained too much power might forget its place. The king of the gods feared that humanity, guided by ambition and curiosity, could become something unpredictable, and so Zeus began to consider a response. The ancient stories do not present Pandora as a simple character. She is a mystery created at the meeting point of divine punishment and human destiny. Some interpretations see her as a warning against curiosity. Others suggest she represents the unavoidable mixture of beauty and suffering that defines human life. Historians continue to debate how ancient Greeks truly understood her role, because myths were living stories that changed across generations. But one truth remains beneath every version. Pandora was not created in an ordinary moment. She appeared when the relationship between gods and humans was already broken. As the sacred fires of Olympus burned beneath the endless stars, Zeus prepared a plan that would reshape the mortal world forever. The gods would gather their gifts. The craftsman Hephaestus would shape something new from earth and divine skill. Other gods and goddesses would offer their blessings and hidden intentions. And somewhere beyond the mountains, beyond the quiet villages and sleeping seas, humanity waited for the arrival of the woman who would carry the fate of every generation that followed, before Pandora's footsteps ever touched the earth, before the mysterious vessel rested in her hands. Humanity existed in a world still close to the presence of the gods. The distance between heaven and earth had not yet become as wide as it would later become. Mortals still looked toward the mountains and wondered if divine eyes were watching them from above. The smoke from their small fires rose into the evening sky like quiet prayers, carrying their hopes, fears, and unanswered questions toward Olympus. You return now to that ancient age, walking across fields where wild grasses move beneath the warm Mediterranean wind. The smell of olive trees fills the air. And somewhere in the distance, waves strike against a rocky shore. Small settlements rest between forests and mountains. Their people living simple lives beneath a universe they believe is filled with invisible powers. The Greeks imagined this early world not as empty or silent, but as a place where every part of nature had a story. The first generations of humans were often described as fragile beings. Unlike the gods, they did not possess eternal youth. Unlike the great creatures of the earth, they lacked natural strength. They were vulnerable to winter storms, disease, hunger, and the passing of time. Yet within their weakness existed something remarkable, the ability to learn. Ancient Greek myths often return to this idea. Humanity's greatest gift was not physical power, but the ability to discover, remember, and create. A human could take a simple piece of stone and transform it into a tool. A human could watch the movement of the stars and begin to understand the rhythms of the heavens. A human could tell stories and preserve memories long after a single life had ended. But this gift was also dangerous. The gods of Olympus were powerful, but they were also deeply concerned with order. Zeus had not fought the Titans simply to gain a throne. In the ancient imagination, his victory represented the creation of a new balance. The universe had been chaotic before. Generations of divine beings had struggled for control, and Zeus wanted a world where every force had its proper place. The mountains belonged to the gods. The seas belonged to Poseidon. The underworld belonged to Hades. and humanity, though precious, belonged to the mortal realm. This separation between gods and humans was one of the great themes of Greek mythology. Ancient audiences understood that crossing boundaries could bring disaster. The stories of kings, heroes, and even gods often carried the same warning: every gift has a price, and every desire has a consequence. Yet humanity naturally reached upward. You can imagine ancient people standing beneath a sky filled with stars, asking questions that still remain familiar today. Why are we here? Why do we suffer? Why must life end? Why do the gods possess what humans cannot? These questions lived inside Greek myths, and Pandora's story would become one of the greatest attempts to answer them. Before her arrival, the relationship between humans and gods was already changing. Prometheus watched humanity struggle without the advantages enjoyed by divine beings. He saw them trembling in the cold nights, hiding from wild animals, and living without the knowledge that could transform their existence. Some ancient traditions describe Prometheus as a creator of humanity itself, shaping humans from clay and giving them life. Other traditions focus on his role as a protector and teacher. These differences remind you that Greek mythology was not a single fixed book written once. It was a collection of stories carried by poets, priests, and communities across centuries. The mystery surrounding Prometheus remains part of his power. Was he a rebellious figure who challenged the gods? Was he a compassionate guardian who sacrificed himself for humanity? Or was he both at the same time? Ancient Greeks often found wisdom in such contradictions. They understood that a person could carry noble intentions and still create dangerous consequences. While Prometheus looked toward humanity with sympathy, Zeus looked toward the future with caution. The king of Olympus had already seen how ambition could destroy even powerful beings. He remembered the rebellion of the Titans. He remembered how one generation of gods had replaced another. A warning from the past remained alive within him. Power without limits eventually becomes a threat. According to later traditions, Zeus began to fear that humans would no longer respect the boundary between themselves and the divine. If mortals gained too much knowledge, would they honor the gods? Or would they attempt to become like them? This question hung over Olympus like distant thunder. The ancient poets who preserved these stories did not always portray Zeus as purely cruel. Instead, they showed a complicated ruler. Zeus could be generous and protective, but he could also be proud, suspicious, and unwilling to accept challenges to his authority. Like many figures in Greek mythology, he reflected human emotions on a divine scale. The first signs of the coming change appeared quietly. A strange feeling moved through the world. The gods watched humanity more closely. The sacred fires of Olympus burned brighter. The winds carried whispers between mountains and islands. Some ancient storytellers imagined that signs appeared in nature before great events: unusual storms, mysterious dreams, or omens witnessed by those who understood the language of the gods. No human knew what was coming. They did not know that the gift of fire would soon become the reason for a great punishment. They did not know that Zeus was preparing a response that would enter every household, every family, and every generation that followed. They only knew that something had changed. The world was no longer the same as it had been before. The bond between heaven and earth had weakened, and the actions of one titan would soon bring forth a creation unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Far away on Mount Olympus, beneath halls of shining marble and columns touched by moonlight, Zeus prepared his answer, and that answer would have a face, a name, and a destiny. Her name would be Pandora. Long before Pandora carried her mysterious vessel into the world of mortals, the fate of humanity was already tied to a single flame. It was not a great wildfire spreading across forests, nor a simple warmth against the cold. In the imagination of ancient Greece, fire was a sacred force, a bridge between the mortal world and the divine. It was the spark of civilization, the light that pushed back the darkness, and the gift that allowed humans to transform their fragile existence into something greater. You return now to the mountains and valleys of an ancient world, where evening shadows stretch across the earth and small communities gather beneath the stars. The night air is cool, carrying the scent of wood smoke and wild herbs. Without fire, the darkness would have been overwhelming. There would be no glowing hearth at the center of a home, no metal shaped by skilled hands, no shared meals beside warm flames, no stories whispered around the light. For humanity, fire meant survival. For Zeus, fire represented something much more dangerous. It represented knowledge. The story of Prometheus begins with compassion. But like many stories from Greek mythology, compassion becomes tangled with pride, rebellion, and consequence. Prometheus was a titan, a member of the older divine generation that had ruled before Zeus and the Olympians. Yet unlike many of the titans who opposed Zeus, Prometheus was not remembered mainly for seeking power. He was remembered because he looked downward, toward humanity. He saw beings who were small and temporary compared with the immortals above them. Humans lived short lives, while the gods remained forever young. Humans suffered hunger, while the gods enjoyed endless feasts. Humans faced storms and darkness, while Olympus stood beyond the reach of time. Prometheus felt that this imbalance was too great. Some ancient traditions say that Prometheus helped Zeus defeat the Titans, believing that the younger gods would create a fairer universe. But after Zeus took control of the cosmos, Prometheus began to see a different reality. The new ruler of Olympus wanted stability, but stability often required obedience. Prometheus wanted freedom. The conflict between them grew quietly, like a storm forming beyond the horizon. You can imagine the halls of Olympus during this time. White marble walls reflected the glow of golden lamps. Divine voices echoed beneath towering columns. The gods celebrated their victory, believing that the universe had finally found order. Yet among them stood Prometheus, looking beyond the palace walls toward the distant earth below. He did not see weakness, he saw possibility. The ancient Greeks often viewed knowledge as a powerful force that could bless or harm. Wisdom could create cities, medicine, art, and laws. But knowledge without humility could lead to arrogance. This balance was at the heart of many Greek myths. The gods did not always punish humans because they hated them. Often, they feared what humans might become when they forgot their limits. Prometheus believed humanity deserved the chance to grow. And so, according to the most famous version of the myth, he took fire from the gods and gave it to mankind. The moment itself has been imagined for centuries. Some storytellers describe Prometheus carrying a hidden ember inside a hollow stalk of fennel, protecting the divine flame as he descended from Olympus. You can picture him walking through the darkness, the small glow of the stolen fire illuminating his hands, knowing that this single act would change everything. When humans received the flame, their world transformed. They gathered around it. They learned to cook food and preserve it. They shaped tools and weapons. They worked with metals and created objects that had never existed before. Fire allowed them to build, invent, and dream. The first flames of human civilization rose into the night sky, but above them, Zeus watched. The king of the gods did not see only improvement. He saw a challenge. Prometheus had crossed a boundary that Zeus believed must remain untouched. The distinction between gods and humans was beginning to blur. Ancient audiences would have understood the seriousness of this moment. A mortal who tried to steal immortality or divine power often faced destruction. But here, the challenger was not a mortal. It was a titan, a being with ancient authority and knowledge. The question was not simply whether Prometheus had stolen fire. The question was whether anyone had the right to decide what humanity deserved. This uncertainty is one reason the myth has survived for so long. Historians continued to debate whether ancient Greeks saw Prometheus as a hero of human progress or a warning about dangerous ambition. Another interpretation suggests that the myth reflects the complicated relationship between civilization and suffering. Every advancement brings both benefits and new responsibilities. Zeus eventually decided that Prometheus could not be left unpunished. The punishment was severe. Prometheus was taken to a remote mountain, far from the warmth of human homes and the comfort of divine halls. There, according to the ancient stories, he was chained to a rocky cliff where an eagle came each day to consume his immortal liver, which would grow back again and continue the endless cycle of suffering. The image was powerful because it represented more than physical pain. Prometheus became a symbol of endurance, sacrifice, and the cost of challenging greater powers. Yet Zeus was not finished. Punishing Prometheus dealt with the one who had broken the boundary. But the king of Olympus also wanted to answer the deeper problem. Humanity had received a gift that came from the gods, and Zeus wanted to remind mortals that every gift carried responsibility. The warning had been given, the balance had been disturbed, and from the quiet workshops of Olympus, another plan began to take shape. A creation unlike any before would soon walk among humans. She would be beautiful, intelligent, and filled with gifts from the gods themselves. She would appear as a blessing, yet hidden within her arrival would be a mystery that humanity would spend thousands of years trying to understand. As the winds moved across the mountains where Prometheus remained imprisoned, the fires of human civilization continued to burn below, and far above, in the halls of Olympus, Zeus prepared Pandora. The story now moves from the lonely cliffs where Prometheus suffered to the shining heights of Mount Olympus, where a different kind of creation was about to begin. While humans gathered around the fires they had received, while villages slowly learned the secrets of metal, farming, and craft, the gods prepared something that would forever change the human story. In the quiet halls of Olympus, beneath ceilings that seemed to touch the stars, Zeus formed his answer to Prometheus. You can imagine the divine palace resting above the clouds. Marble columns rise into the mist, their surfaces glowing beneath the silver light of the moon. The air carries the scent of sacred incense and burning offerings. Far below, storms move across the seas. But above the clouds there is a strange stillness. The gods have gathered, and each one knows that a moment of great importance is approaching. Zeus did not simply want to destroy humanity. The ancient myths are more complicated than that. He wanted to restore a balance that he believed had been broken. The gift of fire had given humans power. But Zeus believed humans also needed to understand limits, responsibility, and the consequences of their choices. The creation of Pandora was therefore not an ordinary act. She was not born from nature, nor from the blood of ancient beings, nor from the forces that shaped the earliest universe. She was carefully designed by the gods themselves. A being who carried within her the talents, beauty, and influence of Olympus. And the first craftsman chosen for this task was Hephaestus, the divine smith whose forge burned beneath the earth. Unlike the other gods who ruled through strength, beauty, or authority, Hephaestus created through patience and skill. His hands shaped weapons for gods, magnificent armor for heroes, and treasures that no mortal craftsman could ever reproduce. You can picture his workshop glowing in the darkness, Rivers of molten metal flow like golden streams. Sparks rise into the air like tiny stars. The sound of the hammer striking the anvil echoes through the mountain chambers. Here, among fire and stone, the first form of Pandora was created. Ancient traditions describe Hephaestus shaping her body from earth and water, giving form to something that had never existed before. She was crafted with extraordinary care, not as a simple figure, but as a masterpiece meant to stand between the world of gods and humans. But a body alone was not enough. The gods each contributed something of themselves. Athena, goddess of wisdom and strategy, taught Pandora skill and understanding. In Greek imagination, Athena represented intelligence guided by discipline. Her presence suggested that Pandora was not created as a mindless instrument. She possessed awareness, ability, and thought. Aphrodite, goddess of beauty and desire, gave her grace and charm. Her presence added the mysterious power of attraction, the force that can bring people together but can also cloud judgment. Ancient Greeks understood beauty as a powerful gift, one that could inspire devotion but also create conflict. Hermes, messenger of the gods, offered another quality: persuasion. He gave Pandora the ability to communicate, to move between worlds, and to influence those around her. Yet Hermes was also known for cleverness and trickery, reminding listeners that words themselves could be used for both kindness and deception. Other gods and goddesses added their own gifts. Some traditions describe clothing, jewelry, and ornaments being placed upon Pandora, each item carrying symbolic meaning. She was surrounded by divine craftsmanship, a living representation of everything the gods could offer. And then came her name. Pandora means all gifted, or she who receives all gifts. This name itself carries the mystery of the myth. Was she truly a gift, or was she a punishment disguised as one? This question has followed the story for centuries. Ancient Greek audiences may have understood Pandora in different ways. Some saw her as a warning about curiosity and the dangers of ignoring divine commands. Others viewed her as a symbol of the complicated nature of human existence. Life contains beauty and pain together, joy and suffering, hope and fear. Pandora's arrival represented that unavoidable mixture. Historians continue to debate the original meaning of Pandora's story, because the surviving myths come from different periods and traditions. Some researchers believe the myth reflects ancient Greek attitudes toward marriage, women, and the household. Others suggest that Pandora represents something broader: humanity's discovery that every blessing may carry hidden consequences. As Pandora stood before the gods, Zeus looked upon his creation. Perhaps he saw justice. Perhaps he saw revenge. Perhaps he saw something even the gods could not fully understand. Greek mythology often presents the gods as powerful but not all-knowing. They could control storms, seas, and kingdoms, but they still faced uncertainty. Even Zeus, the ruler of Olympus, lived within a universe shaped by forces older than himself, including fate and destiny. A mysterious sign surrounded Pandora's creation. Ancient storytellers imagined that the moment she opened her eyes, the heavens seemed to pause. The winds became still. The sacred fires burned without movement. It was as if the entire universe waited to discover what this new being would bring. No one on Earth knew her name yet. No human village had seen her face. No mortal understood that this creation would become connected with every generation that followed. Soon, Pandora would leave Olympus and enter the world of humans. Soon, she would meet the one person whose choice would determine the future of mankind. Epimetheus, the titan known as the one who thinks afterward, was waiting beneath the same endless sky, and the warning given by Prometheus would soon be tested. Before Pandora descended from the shining halls of Olympus into the world of mortals, the gods who created her remained gathered beneath the eternal skies, each carrying their own thoughts, desires, and uncertainties. The ancient Greeks never imagined their gods as distant, emotionless forces. They were powerful, but they possessed passions much like humans. They loved, argued, feared, competed, and sometimes acted from pride. This was what made their myths feel alive, because Olympus itself reflected the complicated nature of existence. You return to that divine mountain, where clouds drift slowly around golden towers and the sound of distant thunder rolls across the heavens. The marble floors beneath the gods' feet are cool and smooth, reflecting the glow of sacred fires burning in bronze vessels. Outside the palace halls, the wind moves through immortal forests, carrying the scent of wild flowers and mountain air. Within these halls, Pandora's creation was more than a single act. It was the result of many divine personalities coming together, each leaving a mark upon the being who would soon enter human history. At the center of everything stood Zeus. The king of Olympus was not merely a ruler who sat upon a throne and commanded storms. Ancient Greeks saw him as the guardian of order, the protector of oaths, and the force that maintained balance between the different parts of the universe. Temples dedicated to Zeus stood across the Greek world, where people offered sacrifices and prayers, hoping for protection, justice, and favor. Yet Zeus also carried flaws. The myths often reveal his pride, his suspicion, and his desire to maintain control. He had witnessed the destruction caused by previous generations of gods, and he feared that disorder could return. The rebellion of the Titans remained a memory written into the foundations of the universe. For Zeus, Prometheus's theft of fire was not only an act of kindness toward humanity, it was a reminder that even powerful beings could challenge his authority. But the other gods did not necessarily share Zeus's perspective. Athena, who contributed wisdom and skill to Pandora, represented a different kind of power. She was born from Zeus himself. Yet she was often portrayed as thoughtful and measured. Her wisdom was not simply knowledge, but the ability to understand consequences. Some ancient interpretations suggest that Athena's involvement in Pandora's creation creates an interesting tension. Why would the goddess of wisdom help create something that could bring suffering? Perhaps because wisdom itself understands complexity. Athena knew that every choice creates a result. Fire could warm a home or burn a forest. A sharp tool could build a temple or become a weapon. Knowledge could create greatness or bring danger. The gods' gifts were not simply good or evil. Their meaning depended on how they were used. Then there was Aphrodite. The goddess of beauty entered the story with a different kind of influence. To the ancient Greeks, beauty was not considered a simple decoration. Beauty had power. It could inspire artists, unite families, create alliances, and awaken powerful emotions. But beauty could also deceive. It could make people ignore warnings and follow desires without thought. Pandora's beauty was therefore both a blessing and a mystery. She would enter the human world not as a monster or a threat, but as someone captivating. This was part of the myth's deeper meaning. The greatest challenges in life do not always arrive looking frightening. Sometimes they arrive carrying gifts, promises, and possibilities. Hermes, the messenger of the gods, added another layer to Pandora's nature. He was known as the guide between worlds, the protector of travelers, and the clever speaker whose words could change situations. His contribution represented communication and intelligence, but also uncertainty. Words can heal. Words can persuade. Words can deceive. The ancient Greeks understood that language itself was a form of power. A beautiful voice could inspire armies, calm anger, or hide intentions. And then there was Hephaestus, the creator whose hands had shaped Pandora's form. His role carried a quiet sadness, though he was one of the most talented gods. Hephaestus was often separated from the beauty and perfection associated with Olympus. Some myths describe him as being rejected or mocked because of his appearance and physical limitations. Yet from his forge came wonders that even the greatest gods depended upon. Through Hephaestus, the Greeks preserved an important idea. Creation can come from struggle. The imperfect craftsman created something extraordinary. The wounded god shaped beauty as Pandora stood among the gods. A question remained hidden beneath the celebration. Did the gods truly understand what they had created? The ancient stories suggest uncertainty. Some traditions portray Zeus as fully aware of Pandora's future role. Others leave more room for mystery, suggesting that even divine beings could not see every consequence of their actions. Greek mythology often returned to this idea: knowledge has limits, even among immortals. Above Olympus, a strange omen appeared. The old poets imagined the sky growing unusually quiet. The winds that normally moved around the mountain slowed. The sacred fires burned with a steady flame, neither growing brighter nor fading, to ancient audiences. Such signs suggested that the world was standing at the edge of change. A destiny was approaching, far below Olympus. Humans continued their daily lives. Farmers tended fields beneath the sun. Sailors watched the waves from distant harbors. Families gathered around fires that Prometheus had given them. They did not know that a creation from the gods was preparing to enter their world. They did not know that the greatest changes in human history often begin quietly. A single decision, a single person, a single moment. Pandora was ready. The gods had given her beauty, wisdom, skill, and charm. They had placed within her the gifts of Olympus. But hidden beneath those gifts was the question that would define humanity forever. Was Pandora the beginning of suffering, or was she the beginning of understanding? The answer waited beyond the mountains. In the mortal world where her story was about to unfold, the moment had arrived. After the long struggles between Titans and Olympians, after the theft of fire and the punishment of Prometheus, after the careful work of the gods within the shining halls of Olympus, Pandora stood ready to enter a world that had never seen anyone like her before. She was not born beneath the open sky, not raised among human families, and not shaped by the slow passing of mortal years. She came from the hands of gods, carrying within her the hopes, fears, and mysteries of the divine realm. You can imagine the quiet of that ancient morning. A soft, golden light spreads across Mount Olympus, touching the marble steps and the towering columns of the god's palace. The clouds below drift like a silent ocean, and the first rays of sunlight awaken the sacred groves surrounding the mountain. The air is filled with the scent of flowers, burning incense, and the faint smoke of offerings left for the immortals. Pandora opens her eyes. In that first moment, she experiences a world created by beings far greater than herself. She sees the beauty of Olympus, hears the distant songs of divine celebrations, and feels the warmth of sacred fires that never fade. Yet despite all the gifts placed within her, she remains something new, something unknown even to the gods who created her. This is one of the great mysteries of the myth. Was Pandora only a tool in Zeus's plan, or did she become something more than what the gods intended? Ancient Greek stories often explored the difference between creation and destiny. A creator may shape something, but once that creation enters the world, its path may become impossible to predict. A child may grow beyond the dreams of a parent. A discovery may change history in ways no one expected. A single choice may echo through countless generations. Pandora carried this uncertainty with her. The gods prepared her for the mortal world. She was dressed in beautiful garments woven by divine hands. Jewelry was placed upon her, shining like captured sunlight. Her appearance reflected the craftsmanship of Olympus itself. Yet beneath the beauty was something even more important. She possessed awareness. She could listen. She could learn. She could wonder. And perhaps most importantly, she could choose. This detail is what makes Pandora's story so powerful. If she had been nothing more than an object, her myth would have been simple. But Greek storytellers gave her emotions, curiosity, and the ability to make decisions. Her actions would become connected with one of the oldest questions in human storytelling: how much of our lives are controlled by fate? And how much is shaped by our own choices? Before Pandora left Olympus, Zeus gave instructions regarding her journey. The gods had prepared everything carefully. She was to be brought to the mortal world, where she would meet Epimetheus, the brother of Prometheus. Epimetheus was very different from his brother. Where Prometheus looked ahead and considered consequences, Epimetheus was known for thinking afterward. His name itself reflected this nature. He represented the person who understands a lesson only after the moment has passed. Yet this did not make him foolish or without value. Ancient myths often used contrasting characters to explore different aspects of human nature. Prometheus represented foresight. Epimetheus represented experience. One imagined the future. The other learned from the past. Together, they reflected the two ways humans often move through life. As Pandora prepared to descend from Olympus, the gods watched in silence. Some ancient traditions describe Hermes leading her toward the mortal realm, guiding her between the world of immortals and the world of humans. The messenger god, with his winged sandals and clever smile, understood more than most what was about to happen. He knew that messages could change kingdoms. He knew that gifts could carry hidden meanings. He knew that journeys often revealed truths that were invisible at the beginning. The path from Olympus to Earth was filled with wonder. Pandora passed through skies where birds moved beneath the clouds and mountains rose like ancient guardians. Below her, rivers curved through valleys, forests stretched toward distant horizons, and villages rested beside the sea. Human life continued unaware. A farmer pressed seeds into dark soil. A fisherman repaired his nets beside a harbor wall. A family gathered around a fire as evening arrived. None of them knew that the gods were about to introduce a figure who would become remembered for thousands of years. When Pandora finally approached the human world, another warning remained in the shadows. Prometheus had already understood that Zeus would respond to the theft of fire before his punishment. He had warned others not to accept gifts from Olympus without caution. The Titan knew that the gods' generosity could sometimes hide a deeper purpose. But warnings are not always enough. A person may hear advice and still follow curiosity. A person may recognize danger and still choose to open the door. This was the mystery waiting before Pandora. The ancient Greeks understood curiosity as one of humanity's greatest qualities. Without curiosity, there would be no exploration, no discoveries, no understanding of the world. But curiosity without wisdom could lead into darkness. The same force that allowed humans to learn about the stars could also lead them toward forbidden knowledge. The same desire that built temples could also create conflicts. As night descended over the mortal lands, the stars appeared above the quiet earth. Somewhere beyond the mountains, Epimetheus was waiting. He did not know that his life was about to change. He did not know that the woman approaching him carried the combined gifts of Olympus. He only knew that a stranger from the realm of gods was coming, and destiny was moving closer with every step. The mortal world was quiet when Pandora arrived. The great storms of the gods had passed. The battles of the Titans had become distant memories, and humans continued their lives beneath the endless sky. They planted crops beneath the warm sun, guided ships across blue waters, and gathered around small fires as evening shadows covered the land. They believed the world had found a peaceful rhythm, but beneath that peaceful surface, destiny was already moving. You walk now into the lands where Epimetheus lived, a place far from the shining halls of Olympus. The mountains rise in the distance, covered in morning mist. The sound of birds moves through ancient forests, while the sea wind carries the scent of salt and wildflowers across the countryside. Here, away from the power of the gods, the life of mortals and titans continued side by side. Epimetheus was not like his brother Prometheus. The two titans carried different visions of existence. Prometheus looked forward. He imagined what humanity could become. He saw possibilities hidden inside fragile beings. Epimetheus, however, lived closer to the present moment. He was a figure shaped by experience rather than prediction. He often understood the meaning of events only after they had already happened. Yet this quality made him deeply human. Ancient Greek storytellers did not create Epimetheus simply as a foolish character. He represented something familiar within everyone, the difficulty of seeing the consequences of our choices before making them. Humans often move through life with incomplete knowledge. They choose, they hope, they make mistakes, and only afterward do they understand what their decisions truly meant. This was the kind of person who would receive Pandora before Pandora reached him. Prometheus had already delivered a warning. The Titan understood Zeus better than most. He knew the king of Olympus was patient, but he was also proud. Prometheus knew that the theft of fire could not remain unanswered. The gods had their own laws, and those who crossed divine boundaries often paid a terrible price. The warning was simple. Do not accept gifts from Zeus. Do not trust something offered without understanding its purpose. But warnings, even those given by someone wise, do not always control destiny. This became one of the central mysteries of Pandora's story. Did Epimetheus ignore the warning because he lacked wisdom, or was his choice part of a fate that even the gods could not avoid? Ancient traditions leave room for both possibilities. When Pandora approached, she did not appear as a threat. She did not arrive with weapons or signs of destruction. Instead, she came carrying beauty, grace, and the gifts of the gods. She was everything that could attract admiration. This was what made her arrival so powerful. Danger rarely announces itself. Sometimes it arrives quietly. Sometimes it arrives wearing the appearance of a blessing. You can imagine the first meeting between Pandora and Epimetheus beneath the golden light of the afternoon. The world around them seems peaceful. Leaves move gently in the wind. The distant sound of waves reaches the shore. For a moment, there is no feeling of disaster, no sign of tragedy, only wonder. Epimetheus sees before him someone unlike anyone he has ever known. Pandora is not a creature of the wild or a simple mortal. She carries the presence of Olympus itself. Her words, her appearance, and her manner reveal the influence of the gods who shaped her. Perhaps Epimetheus remembered his brother's warning. Perhaps a quiet voice inside him suggested caution, but another feeling was stronger: curiosity, admiration, the desire to understand something new. Greek mythology often returns to this conflict. Humans and even gods are driven by curiosity. It is the force that leads heroes across oceans, into unknown lands, and toward forbidden knowledge. Without curiosity, humanity would remain in darkness, but curiosity can also open doors that cannot easily be closed. Pandora's arrival represented that uncertainty. The ancient Greeks did not see the world as a simple struggle between good and evil. They understood that blessings and burdens could exist together. A powerful invention could improve life while creating new dangers. A beautiful gift could bring joy while also carrying hidden consequences. Pandora herself embodied this contradiction. She was created through the talents of the gods. Athena gave wisdom, Aphrodite gave beauty, Hermes gave communication and influence, Hephaestus gave form and craftsmanship. She was, in many ways, a reflection of everything magnificent about Olympus. And yet, she was also connected to Zeus's anger. This contradiction made her unforgettable. As Epimetheus welcomed Pandora into his home, the world seemed to hold its breath. somewhere far away, Prometheus remained imprisoned on the lonely mountain, his suffering continuing beneath the endless sky. The eagle returned again and again, and the Titan endured his punishment. Yet even in his suffering, Prometheus could not know exactly what would happen next. Would Pandora bring only pain? Would humanity lose everything because of Zeus's plan? Or would something unexpected survive? A mysterious omen surrounded those days. Ancient storytellers imagined unusual signs appearing before great changes. The winds shifted strangely. Birds became silent beneath the evening sky. The sacred fires burned with a strange stillness, as if nature itself sensed that a new chapter of human existence had begun. But no one understood the meaning. Not Epimetheus, not Pandora, not even perhaps the gods themselves. For now, there was only a quiet household beneath the stars, a woman created by Olympus, and a forgotten warning waiting in the darkness. Soon, Pandora would discover the object that would make her name eternal, a sealed vessel, a gift from the gods, and a mystery that humanity would never stop trying to understand. The days after Pandora's arrival passed quietly, almost peacefully. The world did not change with thunder or earthquakes. There was no great storm announcing the beginning of a new age. Instead, destiny moved softly, hidden inside ordinary moments. A conversation beneath the evening sky, a glance toward an unfamiliar object, a question left unanswered. This was how many of the greatest changes in Greek mythology began. You return now to the home of Epimetheus, a place far removed from the golden halls of Olympus. The walls are simple, built for mortal life rather than divine splendor. A small fire burns in the center of the room, its gentle crackling filling the silence. The scent of wood smoke mixes with the smell of olive oil, fresh bread, and the earth after rain. Outside, the night wind moves through the trees, and the stars shine above a world unaware of the secret waiting within. Pandora lives among humans, but she carries a connection to the gods. She is both familiar and foreign. She walks on the same soil as mortals. She feels the same warmth of the sun and hears the same sound of waves along the coast. Yet she was created in Olympus, shaped by divine hands, and surrounded by mysteries that no human could fully understand. Among the objects she brought with her was a sealed container. This object has become one of the most famous symbols in all of mythology. For centuries, people have called it Pandora's box, but the earliest Greek traditions describe it differently. The ancient word used in surviving sources refers to a large storage jar, often called a pythos, a common object in Greek households used to hold valuable materials such as grain, wine, or oil. This detail may seem small, but it changes the image of the story. Instead of a small wooden box, imagine a large clay vessel resting quietly in a room, its surface marked by the hands of ancient craftsmen. It stands silently beside the walls of the house, ordinary in appearance, but carrying a secret unlike anything else in the human world. Historians continue to debate exactly how this transformation from jar to box happened through later retellings. Some researchers believe the change came from translation traditions, while others suggest that the newer image became more memorable because of its simplicity. Yet beneath the different versions, the central mystery remains the same. What was inside? And why was it given to Pandora? Ancient Greek storytellers offered different interpretations. Some traditions suggest that Zeus placed the vessel in Pandora's possession as part of his punishment against humanity. Others present the object as a test, a moment where human choice would determine the future. Another interpretation suggests that the jar represented something deeper, the unpredictable nature of existence itself. Life contains things we welcome and things we fear, joy and sorrow, beauty and suffering, hope and despair. The jar became a symbol of all that humans cannot completely control. You can imagine Pandora seeing the vessel for the first time. Perhaps she noticed the careful craftsmanship. Perhaps she wondered why such an important object had been placed in her care. Perhaps she remembered the many gifts the gods had given her and assumed this was simply another blessing from Olympus. But somewhere within her mind remained a question. Why had the gods been so careful? Why had Zeus included this object in her journey? Curiosity began to grow. The ancient Greeks understood curiosity as a powerful force. It was not always considered negative. Curiosity allowed humans to explore the world, discover knowledge, and create civilizations. The same curiosity that could lead someone toward danger could also lead someone toward wisdom. This is why Pandora's story remains so complex. If she had never wondered, never questioned, never looked closer, she would have avoided the tragedy. But without curiosity, humanity would also never have discovered new lands, new ideas, and new possibilities. The myth does not simply ask whether curiosity is good or bad. It asks what happens when curiosity meets uncertainty. The warning from Prometheus still lingered like a distant echo. Do not accept gifts from Zeus without caution. Do not assume that beauty means safety. Do not believe that every blessing is exactly what it appears to be. Yet Pandora did not know the full story. She was not present when Prometheus challenged Zeus. She did not witness the anger of Olympus. She did not see the punishment on the mountain cliffs. She only knew the world she had been given. And perhaps this is what makes her story so tragic. Pandora was not created as a villain. She was created as someone caught between forces greater than herself. The gods had shaped her. The Titans had warned her. Humanity would remember her. But she herself was simply a being trying to understand the strange world into which she had been placed. As the seasons passed, the sealed jar remained. The fire continued burning in the household. The waves continued striking the distant shores. The moon continued crossing the night sky. Everything appeared normal. Yet ancient storytellers imagined that the gods were watching. A divine sign remained hidden in the silence. The sacred fires of Olympus burned brighter on certain nights, and strange dreams were said to visit those who sensed that change was approaching. The world was waiting for one moment, one decision, one movement of human hands. Soon, Pandora would stand before the vessel. Soon, she would reach toward the seal, and humanity would enter a new age. The jar remained closed, but the story of humanity had already begun to move toward its turning point, like a distant storm gathering beyond the horizon. The consequences of Zeus's decision waited silently. There was no immediate sign that the world was about to change. The rivers still flowed through green valleys. The olive trees still moved beneath the Mediterranean wind. Ships still crossed the blue waters carrying merchants, fishermen, and travelers between ancient islands. Life continued. And perhaps that was what made the coming transformation so powerful. Great changes rarely arrive with warnings that everyone can understand. Sometimes they begin with a quiet moment, a simple choice, or a question that seems harmless. In Pandora's story, the fate of humanity rested not upon a battlefield or a clash between armies, but inside a peaceful home where a woman looked upon a mysterious vessel and wondered what secrets it contained. You return now to that quiet household of Epimetheus and Pandora. The evening sun has disappeared beyond the mountains, leaving behind a sky painted with deep shades of violet and gold. A small fire glows inside the home, casting soft shadows against the walls. Outside, the scent of wild herbs fills the air, and the sound of distant waves reaches the shore. Pandora sits surrounded by the unfamiliar world she has entered. She has learned the rhythms of mortal life. She has watched humans work beneath the sun, prepare their meals, and gather together when darkness arrives. She has seen their struggles, but she has also seen their kindness. She has discovered that humans are not merely weak creatures, as some gods imagined. They laugh, they create, they love, they remember. Perhaps this was something even Zeus had not fully understood. Humanity's weakness was also its strength, because humans knew their lives were temporary. Every moment carried meaning. A sunrise was precious because it would not last forever. A song mattered because the voice singing it would eventually become silent. A family gathering around a fire became valuable because time could never be held still. This fragile beauty was part of what made humans different from the immortal gods. But now, something was about to enter that fragile world. According to the ancient traditions, Pandora eventually opened the sealed jar. The reasons behind her action remain uncertain. Some versions suggest curiosity overcame her. Others imply that she was unable to resist the mystery placed before her. Some later interpretations even question whether the act was entirely her own choice, or whether the forces surrounding her had already shaped the outcome. Historians continue to debate these differences because myths often changed as they traveled from one generation to another. Yet every version preserves the same powerful image: a sealed container, a human hand, a moment that cannot be undone. When the lid was lifted, the world changed. Ancient poets described terrible forces escaping from within. Suffering, sickness, hardship, and countless troubles spread across the earth. The peaceful existence humanity once imagined began to fade. The days of effortless life disappeared, replaced by struggle and uncertainty. You can almost hear the transformation: the wind moving differently through the forests, the distant thunder across the mountains, the silence that falls when people realize something has changed forever. The Greeks understood suffering as one of the unavoidable realities of human existence. Their myths did not pretend that life was easy. Heroes faced loss. Kings experienced tragedy. Even the children of gods could suffer. Pandora's story became one explanation for why the human world contained both beauty and pain. Why do people become sick? Why must families experience grief? Why does hardship exist, even among those who have done nothing wrong? Ancient Greeks looked toward stories like Pandora's and found a way to understand these difficult questions. But the myth does not portray suffering as the only result, because something remained. Before that final mystery is revealed, the world must experience the darkness that followed the opening of the jar. Imagine the generations that came after Pandora. People who once believed the gods were close now felt the distance between heaven and earth. The relationship had changed. Humans still prayed, still offered sacrifices, still built temples beneath the open sky. But they understood that existence carried burdens that could not simply disappear. The gift of fire had brought civilization. Pandora's jar had brought suffering. Together, these two moments created a deeper picture of humanity: progress and pain, knowledge and responsibility, freedom and consequence. The same species that could create beautiful temples could also experience sorrow. The same minds that could study the stars could also wonder why suffering existed beneath them. This was the paradox ancient Greeks found within human life as the troubles escaped into the world. Pandora remained behind with the empty vessel. Some traditions describe her realizing the magnitude of what had happened. Perhaps she felt fear, perhaps she felt regret. Perhaps she wondered whether another choice could have changed everything. But time does not move backward. The ancient Greeks often returned to this idea. Fate was a powerful force, and even gods struggled against certain destinies. A choice made in one moment could shape centuries. A single action could echo through countless generations. Yet the story was not finished. The jar was not completely empty. One final presence remained hidden inside. One final mystery waited. Outside, the night sky stretched above the earth. The same stars that had watched the rise of Olympus and the fall of the Titans now watched humanity enter a more difficult age. The gods had changed the world, but they had not completely taken away its possibility, because within the darkness, something still waited. Something small, something fragile, something humanity would need more than ever: hope. After the opening of the jar, the world became a different place. The quiet harmony that humans once imagined was gone, replaced by struggles that touched every generation. The seasons still changed, the rivers still flowed, and the stars still crossed the night sky. But something within human existence had shifted forever. Life remained beautiful, yet it carried a weight it had never known before. You return to the small home where Pandora stands beside the open vessel. The fire has grown low, its flames moving gently in the darkness. The air is still. Outside, the wind passes through the trees, carrying the distant sound of the sea. The world seems to pause after the moment of change, as if even nature is waiting to discover what comes next. Inside the vessel, one thing remains: hope. The meaning of this final presence has fascinated generations of storytellers, historians, and philosophers. Why was hope left behind? Was it a final kindness from Zeus? Was it another mystery placed among humanity's burdens, or was it something that humans were always meant to discover for themselves? The ancient Greeks did not provide one simple answer, and perhaps that is why the story continues to endure. Some interpretations suggest that hope was a gift, a mercy given to humans because they would need strength to endure suffering. Without hope, pain could become impossible to bear. Hope allowed people to continue through hardship, to rebuild after destruction, and to believe that tomorrow could contain something better than today. Others have wondered whether the presence of hope inside the jar carries a more complicated meaning. If hope remained trapped, was humanity separated from the comfort it needed most, or did Pandora's story suggest that hope exists precisely because humans experience difficulty? The mystery remains. But to ancient Greek audiences, hope was never simply optimism. It was a powerful force connected with survival itself. A farmer planting seeds in uncertain soil showed hope. A sailor leaving a familiar harbor and trusting the unknown sea showed hope. A family rebuilding after loss showed hope. Hope was the invisible strength that allowed humans to continue. You can imagine ancient Greeks gathering in the evening around their own household fires, listening to poets recite the story of Pandora. They would not have heard only a tale about a woman and a jar. They would have heard a reflection of their own lives. They knew storms could destroy crops. They knew wars could separate families. They knew illness could arrive without warning. They knew that even the greatest cities eventually faded. Yet they continued. They built temples from stone. They carved statues from marble. They composed songs that survived long after the voices of their creators disappeared. This was humanity's answer to suffering. Creation, memory, hope. The myth of Pandora also revealed something important about Zeus himself. The king of the gods had wanted to restore order after Prometheus challenged him. But the result was more complicated than simple punishment. By introducing suffering into the world, Zeus also created the conditions where courage, compassion, and perseverance could exist without hardship. Would humans understand kindness without loss? Would they value love without uncertainty? Would they search for meaning? Ancient Greek mythology often explored these questions. The gods did not always create perfect worlds. Instead, they created worlds filled with challenges, where beings could reveal their true nature through their choices. Pandora became part of this larger idea. She was not only the bringer of troubles, she was also connected to the beginning of humanity's deeper understanding of itself. The woman created by the gods became a symbol of the human condition. Within her story existed beauty and sorrow, curiosity and consequence, weakness and strength. The ancient poets understood that people are never defined by a single moment. A mistake does not erase every good quality. A tragedy does not erase every possibility. A difficult beginning does not determine the entire journey. This was perhaps the quiet lesson hidden beneath Pandora's story. As the years passed, humans continued living with the burdens released from the jar. They experienced pain, but they also discovered medicine. They faced storms, but they built stronger homes. They endured loss, but they created traditions to preserve memory. The world was harder, but humanity was not defeated. A mysterious sign was said to remain connected with hope. Ancient storytellers imagined that even after darkness entered the world, the stars continued shining with the same quiet light they had always carried. The heavens did not abandon humanity completely. The divine presence remained distant, but not entirely gone. The same night sky that witnessed Prometheus carrying fire now watched humans carry something else: the ability to continue far away. Prometheus remained chained to his mountain. He had sacrificed himself because he believed humanity deserved knowledge. Yet he could not know exactly what his gift would bring. Fire had given humans power, but Pandora's arrival had revealed that power always came with responsibility. The two stories were forever connected. Prometheus gave humanity the ability to transform the world. Pandora revealed the consequences of living within that world. Together, they created one of the deepest reflections in Greek mythology. Human beings are not perfect creatures living in a perfect universe. They are beings who struggle, learn, suffer, and hope. As the centuries passed, the name Pandora would travel beyond Greece. Poets would write about her. Artists would paint her. Philosophers would debate her meaning. Her story would survive because it touched something universal. Every person knows what it means to face uncertainty. Every person knows what it means to lose something. And every person understands the quiet power of continuing forward. The jar was opened long ago in the world of myth, but the question it left behind remains with humanity even now. When darkness enters life, what allows us to keep going? The ancient Greeks had an answer: hope. The story of Pandora did not disappear after the first telling. Like the waves that continue to strike the shores of the Greek islands long after a ship has passed, the memory of Pandora traveled through generations. Poets repeated her name, artists carved her image, and families gathered beneath the evening sky to hear the tale of the woman created by the gods. Her story became more than a myth about one moment of curiosity. It became a way for ancient Greeks to explore the mysteries of human existence. You walk now through the ancient world where Pandora's story lived. The morning sun rises over white marble temples, illuminating columns decorated with carefully carved patterns. Priests prepare offerings beside sacred fires. Merchants move through crowded marketplaces carrying pottery, olive oil, and woven cloth. Sailors return from distant islands, bringing not only goods, but also stories from places beyond the horizon. In this world, myths were not separate from daily life. They were woven into everything. The Greeks told stories of Zeus, Athena, Apollo, Artemis, and countless other gods, not simply for entertainment. These myths helped people understand the forces surrounding them. Storms, harvests, war, love, death, and human suffering all became connected with larger stories about the universe. Pandora's myth occupied a special place because it focused on something every person experienced: being human. Ancient Greeks looked around their world and saw contradictions everywhere. The earth provided food, yet crops could fail. The sea offered trade and adventure, yet storms could destroy ships. Knowledge created progress, yet ambition could lead to conflict. Pandora represented this same balance. She was beautiful, yet connected to hardship. She was a gift, yet carried danger. She was associated with suffering, yet remembered alongside hope. This complexity allowed the myth to survive. Some ancient interpretations viewed Pandora as a warning. In certain traditions, her story reflected concerns about curiosity and the consequences of acting without understanding. The Greeks often valued self-control, believing that wisdom required knowing when to desire something and when to step away. The myth reminded listeners that not every mystery must immediately be uncovered. Not every door must be open. Not every question must be answered without considering the consequences. Yet other interpretations saw Pandora differently, rather than focusing only on her mistake. Some traditions viewed her as a symbol of humanity's difficult journey. She represented the moment when humans entered a world that was no longer simple. A world where suffering existed alongside creativity and resilience. This interpretation suggests that Pandora was not merely the beginning of human problems. She was part of humanity's awakening. Historians continue to debate how ancient Greeks understood Pandora, because myths changed depending on the storyteller, region, and period. Some researchers believe the story reflected ancient attitudes toward marriage and the household, while others suggest it addressed broader philosophical questions about suffering and existence. The uncertainty itself is part of the myth's power. Greek myths were not always designed to provide one final answer. They invited listeners to think, question, and interpret. A story could hold different meanings for different generations. A farmer listening beside a village fire might hear a warning about accepting unknown gifts. A philosopher walking beneath the columns of a temple might see a reflection on human nature. A poet might find inspiration in the contrast between beauty and sorrow. The same story could live many lives. Ancient Greek artists also preserved Pandora's memory through visual traditions. On pottery, sculptures, and decorative works, artists explored scenes from divine myths. Although Pandora's image was less common than figures like Athena or Aphrodite, her presence remained part of a larger artistic conversation about creation. Women, gods, and destiny. You can imagine an ancient workshop filled with the sound of craftsmen shaping clay. The smell of wet earth fills the room. A potter carefully paints figures onto a vessel that may one day sit in a household or be placed among offerings. Each image carries a story forward, allowing voices from centuries earlier to survive. The Greeks understood that memory was a form of immortality. Humans died. Cities disappeared. Kingdoms changed. But stories could continue. This idea connects deeply with Pandora herself. She was a mortal figure created by immortal beings. Yet she achieved a kind of permanence through memory. Her name survived because people continued asking the same questions her story raised. Why do humans suffer? Why do we search for knowledge? Why do we continue after loss? Why do we hope when the future remains uncertain? These questions were not limited to ancient Greece. They belonged to humanity itself. A quiet prophecy seemed to follow Pandora's name through time. Ancient storytellers imagined that as long as humans faced hardship, the memory of Pandora would remain. Her story would not disappear because every generation would recognize something familiar within it. The vessel she opened was not only a container holding troubles, it was a symbol of the unknown. Every person eventually encounters their own version of Pandora's jar. A decision must be made. A mystery must be faced. A path must be chosen without knowing exactly what lies ahead. And like Pandora, every person discovers that life contains things beyond control. Yet the story does not end with fear, because humanity continued. Through wars and peace, through prosperity and hardship, people carried the same qualities that remained after Pandora's choice: curiosity, courage, memory, hope. As evening falls over the ancient Greek landscape, the temples grow quiet. The last sunlight fades from the marble columns. Olive trees move gently in the breeze, and the stars begin appearing above the mountains. The old stories remain, not because they describe a world that existed exactly as told, but because they reveal something true about the world people still inhabit. Pandora's legacy was never only about what escaped from the jar. It was about what remained after everything changed. The story of Pandora reveals something surprising about Zeus, the king of the gods, the ruler who commanded thunder and controlled the skies, was not presented as a simple figure of unlimited power. Beneath the golden throne of Olympus, beneath the storms that shook the mountains and the temples built in his honor, there remained a deeper mystery. Even Zeus existed within a universe he did not completely control. You return now to the heights of Mount Olympus, where the clouds move slowly around the ancient halls of the gods. The sound of distant thunder echoes across the valleys below. Torches burn along marble corridors, their flames reflecting against polished stone. The air carries the scent of sacred offerings, and beyond the palace walls, The stars shine over a world filled with countless destinies. Here sat Zeus, the ruler of heaven. To ancient Greeks, Zeus represented authority, justice, and order. He protected sacred promises, watched over travelers, and punished those who violated divine laws. Temples across Greece were built in his name, and communities gathered to honor him through rituals and sacrifices. Yet the myths also revealed another side of Zeus. He could be wise, but he could also be proud. He could protect, but he could also punish. He could create order. Yet sometimes his decisions created new difficulties. This complexity made Zeus one of the most fascinating figures in Greek mythology. The ancient Greeks did not imagine their gods as perfect beings without emotion. Instead, they gave them personalities that reflected the human experience on a much larger scale. Zeus feared chaos because he remembered what came before him. Before the Olympians ruled, the Titans controlled the universe. The old generation of gods had their own conflicts, and the struggle between generations nearly destroyed the balance of creation. Zeus had defeated Cronus and established a new order, but the memory of rebellion remained. Perhaps this was why Prometheus troubled him so deeply. Prometheus was not merely a titan who stole fire. He was a reminder that challenges to authority could appear again. When Prometheus gave fire to humanity, Zeus saw more than compassion. He saw a possible return of disorder. Humans, who once depended entirely on the gods, now possessed a force that could transform their lives. The creation of Pandora was Zeus's attempt to restore balance, but the result was not simple. The ancient myths leave an important question unanswered. Did Zeus know exactly what Pandora's arrival would cause? Or did even the king of Olympus discover the consequences only afterward? Different traditions offer different possibilities. Some stories portray Zeus as fully aware, deliberately creating Pandora as punishment for humanity and Prometheus. Other interpretations suggest that Pandora became part of a larger destiny that even the gods could not completely escape. This uncertainty reflects one of the deepest ideas in Greek mythology: fate. The Greeks often imagined destiny as a force older than the Olympian gods themselves. The three fates, known as the Moirai, were believed to measure, assign, and end the threads of life. Even Zeus, despite his immense power, was sometimes portrayed as respecting the boundaries of fate. This created a fascinating tension. If Zeus ruled the universe, who ruled Zeus? Ancient storytellers did not always answer directly. Instead, they allowed the mystery to remain. You can imagine Greek philosophers and poets discussing these ideas beneath the shade of olive trees or inside quiet temple courtyards. They wondered whether humans truly controlled their choices, or whether every action was part of a larger design already written into the universe. Pandora's story became part of this discussion. Was she responsible for the suffering that entered the world? Or was she simply fulfilling a destiny created before she was ever born? Was Prometheus a rebel, or was he a figure destined to bring humanity knowledge, despite the consequences? Was Zeus a cruel ruler, or was he a guardian attempting to maintain an imperfect balance? The answers were never simple. This was why the myths remained alive. They did not present a world where everything was clearly divided between right and wrong. Instead, they showed a universe filled with choices, consequences, and uncertainty. Even the gods faced difficult decisions. Zeus could create storms, but he could not remove every storm from existence. He could grant power, but he could not prevent every misuse of power. He could shape events, but he could not erase every consequence. In this way, the gods reflected the same reality experienced by humans. Everyone must live with choices already made. Everyone must face unexpected outcomes. Everyone must continue forward without knowing everything that waits ahead. A quiet omen was often associated with the aftermath of Pandora's story. Ancient poets imagined that Zeus sometimes looked down from Olympus and watched humanity struggle beneath the burdens that had entered the world. Perhaps he saw punishment. Perhaps he saw a lesson. Perhaps he saw something neither gods nor humans fully understood. The mystery remained, But one thing became clear. The relationship between gods and humans had changed forever. Once, humanity looked upward, believing the gods held every answer. After Pandora, humans began to understand that even divine actions could create uncertainty. The world was no longer a place where mortals simply received their destiny. They had to live with it. They had to interpret it. They had to find meaning within it. And perhaps this was the greatest transformation of all. Pandora did not only bring suffering into the world, she brought a deeper awareness of what it meant to be human. As the night settles over Mount Olympus, the thunder fades into silence. The torches burn lower in the divine halls. Below, countless human lives continue beneath the stars. The gods remain above. The mortals remain below. But between them exists something neither side can fully escape. Fate, high above the mortal world, where the mountains rise into the cold silence of the heavens. Prometheus remained bound to his lonely fate. The story of Pandora could never truly be separated from his own. Because the woman created by Zeus existed because of the Titan who dared to believe humanity deserved more. Their stories moved together like two paths crossing through the same ancient forest, one marked by sacrifice and the other marked by consequence. You return now to the distant mountain where Prometheus suffered. The air is colder here. The winds move sharply across the rocks, carrying the scent of snow and stone. The world below stretches endlessly, with forests, rivers, and human settlements scattered beneath the open sky. From this height, Prometheus could see the very creatures he had tried to help. The flames they carried still burned. The civilizations they created still grew. The knowledge he had given them continued spreading. Yet his punishment continued as well. Ancient Greek storytellers imagined Prometheus chained to the mountain by the command of Zeus, his immortal body enduring endless suffering. Each day, the eagle descended from the sky, and each night, the wound was renewed. The punishment was not only physical, it was symbolic. Prometheus was trapped between two worlds, a titan who belonged to the age of gods, yet a protector who had chosen the future of humanity. His suffering became a question that ancient audiences continued to consider. Was Prometheus wrong to challenge Zeus? Or was he right to help those who needed him? The answer depended on the listener. Some Greeks saw Prometheus as a warning. Even a noble intention could become dangerous when someone ignored the boundaries established by the gods. The myth reminded people that every action created consequences, and even generosity could lead to suffering if it disrupted the balance of the universe. Others viewed Prometheus as a heroic figure. He represented courage, sacrifice, and the willingness to suffer for others. Later interpretations especially emphasized this side of his character, seeing him as a symbol of human progress and the desire to overcome limitations. This difference in interpretation is one reason the story remained powerful. Prometheus was not simply a villain or a hero. He was both a gift giver and a rebel, a protector and a challenger, a figure whose greatest strength was also the source of his greatest pain. As the centuries passed, ancient Greeks continued telling stories about him beside their fires and within their temples. They remembered that civilization itself came with a cost. Fire allowed humans to create, but creation required responsibility. Knowledge opened new possibilities, but it also introduced new dangers. This lesson connected directly with Pandora. Prometheus gave humanity a powerful gift. Pandora revealed that every gift could carry unexpected consequences. Together, their stories formed a larger reflection on human existence. You can imagine the contrast between them. Prometheus stood upon the mountain beneath endless storms, representing the desire to give humanity the tools to shape its future. Pandora stood among humans, representing the uncertainty that came when those tools entered an imperfect world. One gave humans power. The other revealed the burden of having that power. The ancient Greeks understood this connection deeply because their own world reflected the same tension. Their ships crossed dangerous seas to discover new lands, Their craftsmen created magnificent temples from stone. Their thinkers explored questions about nature, justice, and existence. But progress always carried risk. A stronger ship could travel farther, but it could also encounter greater storms. A sharper weapon could protect a city, but it could also bring destruction. A deeper understanding of the world could create wisdom, but it could also reveal painful truths. Prometheus and Pandora together represented this reality. A mysterious sign was said to follow Prometheus throughout his imprisonment. Ancient traditions describe prophecies surrounding his future, including the belief that one day his suffering would end. The details differed between versions, but the idea remained even the longest punishment might not last forever. This possibility offered a quiet form of hope, the same hope that remained after Pandora opened the jar, the same hope that allowed humans to continue despite suffering. Perhaps this was the hidden connection between the two stories. Prometheus suffered because he believed humanity had potential. Pandora's story showed that humanity would struggle with the consequences of that potential. Yet neither story ended in complete darkness. The Titan's punishment became part of his legacy. His pain was remembered. His sacrifice was remembered. His compassion was remembered. And memory itself became a kind of immortality. The Greeks understood that names survived through stories. A person could disappear. A kingdom could fall. And a temple could crumble. But the memory of a meaningful act could continue for thousands of years. Prometheus became one of those names, not because he was perfect, not because he avoided mistakes, but because he made a choice. He looked at humanity and believed they were worth helping. As the evening mist settles over the mountain, the distant fires of human settlements glow below. The same flames that once caused conflict between gods and titans now warm families, illuminate workshops, and guide travelers through darkness. Prometheus cannot touch those flames, but he knows they exist, and perhaps, in the quiet moments between the storms, he understands that his suffering was not meaningless. Far above, the stars continue their endless journey. Below, humanity continues its uncertain path. The world created by Zeus is filled with challenges. The gift given by Prometheus carries responsibility. The mystery left by Pandora remains unanswered. And all three stories lead back to the same truth. To live is to choose. To choose is to accept consequences. And to endure those consequences is to discover what humanity truly is. The story of Pandora has traveled across thousands of years, carried not by a single voice, but by many, like rivers flowing from different mountains and eventually reaching the same sea. The ancient traditions surrounding Pandora changed as they moved through different cities, different generations, and different storytellers. Each version preserved something important, yet each also revealed new questions about humanity, the gods, and the mysterious relationship between fate and choice. You return now to the ancient world of Greece, where stories were carried through spoken tradition long before many of them were written down. In villages surrounded by olive trees, poets recited myths beside glowing fires. In crowded marketplaces, travelers shared tales they had heard from distant islands. In temples filled with incense and sacred music, priests preserved traditions connected with the divine. The Greeks did not experience mythology as a single fixed collection of stories. Myths lived, they changed, they adapted, and Pandora's story was one of the clearest examples of this living tradition. One of the most famous surviving versions comes from the poet Hesiod, who described Pandora in his works about the origins of the gods and the struggles of humanity. In this tradition, Pandora's arrival is closely connected with Zeus's response to Prometheus stealing fire. She is presented as part of a divine plan, a creation designed to bring consequences to humanity after the Titan crossed a boundary. Yet even within this version, Pandora is not a simple figure. She is beautiful but dangerous, a gift but also a challenge, a creation of the gods, but also a person whose actions shape the future. This complexity is what allowed later generations to continue discussing her. Some ancient audiences may have focused on the warning contained within the story. They saw Pandora as an example of why humans should respect limits. Curiosity, desire, and ambition could lead people into situations they could not control. But other listeners may have understood something deeper. Perhaps Pandora represented the unavoidable uncertainty of life itself. After all, humans do not choose the world they enter. They are born into circumstances they cannot fully understand. They receive gifts and burdens together. They discover joy and suffering side by side. In this interpretation, Pandora was not only responsible for bringing hardship, she represented the condition of being human. Historians continue to debate these meanings because ancient evidence does not provide one final explanation. Some researchers believe the myth reflects traditional Greek ideas about women, marriage, and the household. Others suggest that the story belongs to a broader tradition about the origins of suffering, similar to myths from other ancient cultures that attempted to explain why the world contains both beauty and pain. Another interpretation suggests that Pandora's story was not originally focused only on punishment. Instead, it may have explored the transition from an earlier imagined age of simplicity into a more complicated human existence. This idea appears throughout Greek mythology. The world often changes from one age to another. The gods overthrow older gods. Heroes leave behind peaceful homes to face challenges. Humans move from innocence into experience. Pandora's arrival becomes part of this larger pattern. She marks a boundary. Before Pandora, humanity exists in one condition. After Pandora, humanity enters another. You can imagine ancient storytellers sitting beneath the stars, discussing these questions late into the night. A traveler from Athens might tell the story differently from someone living on a distant island. A poet might emphasize Zeus's authority, while another storyteller might focus on Pandora's humanity. Neither version needed to completely erase the other. Greek myths often allowed contradictions to exist together. This was not seen as a weakness. It was part of their wisdom. The Greeks understood that some mysteries could not be solved completely. The world itself contained unanswered questions. Why did storms come? Why did people suffer? Why did good intentions sometimes create painful results? Myths provided a way to explore these mysteries without pretending they were simple. The image of Pandora's jar became especially powerful because it captured this uncertainty. The sealed container represented everything unknown. It could hold blessings or dangers. It could represent curiosity, temptation, destiny, or the hidden consequences of human action. A simple object became a symbol of the entire human experience. This is why the image survived long after ancient Greek religion faded. Centuries later, artists, writers, and thinkers continued returning to Pandora. They painted her standing beside the vessel. They imagined her emotions. They questioned whether she was guilty, innocent, or trapped by forces beyond her understanding. The myth continued changing because humanity continued changing. Every generation found a new reflection within it. A scholar might see a story about civilization and suffering. An artist might see a story about beauty and tragedy. A philosopher might see a story about knowledge and consequence. A person facing hardship might simply see a story about continuing despite uncertainty. A quiet prophecy seemed to follow Pandora's name through history. The old stories suggested that as long as humans searched for meaning, her tale would remain alive. The jar would never truly close because every generation would encounter its own mysteries, its own choices, and its own moments of uncertainty. As the sun sets over ancient Greece, the temples become silent. The marble stones that once reflected the voices of worshippers now rest beneath the evening sky. The world that created Pandora has disappeared. But the questions she represents remain. Was suffering a punishment? Was hope a gift? Was destiny already written? Or do humans create meaning through the choices they make? The ancient storytellers left these questions open, and perhaps that was their greatest gift. Because a myth that ends with a simple answer may be remembered for a time, But a myth that continues asking questions can live forever. The story of Pandora does not end with the opening of the jar. The ancient world did not disappear into darkness after suffering entered human life. The rivers continued flowing, the forests continued growing, and the generations of humanity continued walking beneath the same endless sky. Even after the world changed, life continued searching for a way forward. This was one of the deepest ideas hidden within Greek mythology. Destruction was never the final chapter. Change always created something new. You return now to the mortal world after Pandora's decision. The landscapes remain familiar, yet everything feels different. The fields still glow beneath the sunlight. But humans now understand hardship. The nights feel longer because fear has entered the world. The storms feel more dangerous because people have learned that nature cannot always be controlled. Yet around the fires of their homes, humans continue telling stories. They continue building. They continue loving. They continue hoping. The ancient Greeks believed that humanity survived not because life was easy, but because people possessed the ability to adapt. They learned from suffering. They transformed difficulties into knowledge. They carried memories from one generation to the next, allowing each new generation to stand upon the experiences of those who came before. This was the world that followed Pandora, a world of struggle, but also a world of possibility. In some ancient traditions, Pandora became connected with the continuation of humanity through her daughter, Pyrrha. The details of these myths vary, and historians continue to debate how different traditions developed over time. Yet the surviving stories share a powerful theme after destruction or hardship. Humanity finds a way to begin again. The story of Pyrrha connects with another great myth of renewal involving Deucalion, the son of Prometheus. Like many Greek myths, the traditions surrounding these figures overlap, creating a larger reflection on survival and rebirth. You can imagine an ancient world after a great disaster, when the earth is quiet and empty. The waters have changed the landscape. The old world has faded away. Two survivors stand beneath the open sky, looking upon what remains. They do not possess armies. They do not possess treasures. They possess only the will to continue. From this simple beginning, humanity rises again. The meaning was clear to ancient audiences. Life could be damaged, but it could also be restored. This idea connected deeply with Greek beliefs about cycles. The seasons changed and returned. The moon disappeared and appeared again. Fields rested during winter and awakened in spring. The natural world constantly moved between endings and beginnings. Human life followed the same pattern. Loss was real, but renewal was also real. Pandora's story, therefore, became more than an explanation for suffering. It became part of a larger understanding of resilience. The woman created by the gods had brought humanity into a world filled with difficulties. But the generations that followed her were not defined only by those difficulties. They created music from sadness. They created friendships during hardship. They created communities where people could support each other. This was the unexpected response to Zeus's creation. The gods could introduce challenges, but humans could decide what those challenges meant. You can imagine ancient Greek villages at dawn. Smoke rises gently from household fires. Farmers walk across fields covered with morning mist. Children listen to older generations telling stories about gods, heroes, and the distant past. Every person carries memories of struggles that came before. But every new day offers another opportunity. This was the quiet power of humanity, not immortality, not divine strength, endurance. The Greeks understood that humans were special precisely because they were temporary. The gods lived forever, but humans experienced the urgency of time. Because life was limited, choices mattered. Because moments disappeared, memories became precious. Pandora's story reflected this truth. Her name survived because humans continued asking questions about her. Her mistakes survived because humans recognized their own mistakes. Her hope survived because humans needed hope. The ancient Greeks often connected women in mythology with themes of creation, continuity, and transformation. Figures such as Demeter, goddess of harvest, represented the cycle of growth and renewal. Pandora, though connected with suffering, also became part of this larger tradition of understanding how life continues through change. A mysterious sign was often imagined in these stories of renewal. Ancient poets described the earth itself responding after periods of darkness. Flowers returned after winter, rivers flowed again, birds filled silent forests. These images reminded listeners that even when the world seemed broken, hidden forces were preparing a new beginning. Perhaps this was the deepest meaning of hope remaining in Pandora's jar. Hope was not the promise that suffering would disappear. Hope was the belief that life could continue despite suffering. This distinction mattered. Ancient Greeks knew that hardship could not always be avoided. Their world was filled with wars, storms, illnesses, and uncertainty. They did not believe hope meant pretending these things did not exist. Hope meant facing them. As centuries passed, Pandora's name remained connected with this complicated truth. She was remembered not only as the woman who released suffering, but also as a symbol of the moment humanity began understanding itself. Before Pandora, humans lived in one kind of world. After Pandora, they lived in another. A world where choices had consequences. A world where knowledge carried responsibility. A world where hope became necessary. As night falls over the ancient Greek landscape, the stars appear above mountains and seas. The same heavens that watched Zeus create Pandora now watch countless generations of humans continue their journey. The gods created the beginning, but humanity created the meaning. And perhaps that was the final mystery hidden within Pandora's story. The greatest gift was not what the gods placed inside the jar. The greatest gift was what humans discovered after it was opened. After thousands of years. Pandora's story still remains beneath the surface of human memory. The temples where ancient Greeks once offered sacrifices have become silent ruins. The voices of the poets who first carried these stories have disappeared into the distant past. Yet the questions hidden inside the myth continue to follow humanity, like a quiet shadow beneath the stars. You return now to the landscapes of ancient Greece, where the remains of old sanctuaries still stand beneath the open sky. Marble columns rise from the earth, worn by wind and time. Wild grass grows between ancient stones. The scent of olive trees fills the air, and somewhere beyond the hills, waves continue striking the shores just as they did thousands of years ago. The world has changed, but the questions remain. Why do humans suffer? Why do we search for knowledge even when knowledge brings responsibility? Why do we continue hoping even when the future is uncertain? Pandora's story endures because it is not only about gods and titans. It is about every person who has ever faced an unknown future. The ancient Greeks understood something deeply important about existence. Life is never made from only one emotion. Joy does not exist without the possibility of loss. Courage does not exist without fear. Wisdom does not exist without the mistakes that teach us. Pandora represented this complicated truth. She was created in beauty, yet connected to hardship. She was surrounded by divine gifts, yet carried a burden she did not fully understand. She entered the human world with no knowledge of the centuries of debate her name would inspire. Perhaps this is what makes her feel so close to humanity. She was not a perfect goddess. She was not an unstoppable force. She was someone placed into a world she did not create, forced to navigate circumstances beyond her understanding. In this way, Pandora reflected the human condition itself. Every person enters a world already filled with mysteries. No one chooses the time they are born, the challenges they will face, or the unexpected events that shape their path. Like Pandora, humans inherit a world created before them, but they also have the ability to respond. This was one of the most powerful ideas within Greek mythology. Fate may shape the road, but character determines how someone walks upon it. The ancient Greeks often told stories of heroes who faced impossible challenges. Heracles endured his labors. Odysseus survived years of wandering. Perseus confronted terrifying creatures. These stories were not only about victories, they were about endurance. The same lesson existed within Pandora's myth. Humanity did not become meaningful because suffering disappeared. Humanity became meaningful because people continued despite suffering. You can imagine ancient philosophers walking through quiet gardens, discussing these ideas beneath the shade of trees. They wondered whether hardship was something to escape or something that revealed hidden qualities within people. A life without difficulty might be comfortable, but would it create wisdom? A world without uncertainty might feel safe, but would it inspire courage? These questions had no simple answers, and perhaps the Greeks understood that some mysteries were meant to remain. A quiet mystery still surrounds Pandora herself. Was she created as a punishment by Zeus? Or did her arrival serve a larger purpose beyond divine anger? Was the jar a symbol of disaster? Or was it a symbol of the unknown journey every human must experience? Historians continue to debate these interpretations, because myths often contain layers of meaning that cannot be reduced to a single explanation. Ancient stories survived not because every person understood them the same way, but because every generation found something meaningful within them. The story of Pandora also reveals something about the gods. The Olympians possessed incredible power, but they were not free from consequences. Zeus could command storms, but he could not remove uncertainty from existence. The gods could create life, but they could not completely control how that life would unfold. Even divine power had limits. This idea was important to ancient Greek thought. The universe was not simply controlled by one force. Gods, humans, and fate existed within a complicated relationship. Everyone had a place, but everyone also faced boundaries. Pandora's story showed that even the actions of gods could create unexpected outcomes. The jar opened, the world changed, but something new emerged: human understanding. Before suffering entered the world, humans may have known difficulty, but the myth imagined a different kind of existence. After Pandora, humanity gained awareness of struggle and the importance of resilience. Pain became part of the human experience, but so did compassion. Loss became part of life, but so did memory. Uncertainty became unavoidable, but so did hope. The Greeks preserved this balance through their stories, rituals, and traditions. They built temples not because they believed life was perfect, but because they understood humans needed places to reflect on things beyond themselves. A temple was a place of questions. A myth was a journey of understanding. A story was a way of carrying wisdom through time. As evening settles over the ancient world, the last light touches the mountains. The marble temples glow softly beneath the fading sun. The sacred fires burn lower. The voices of the old storytellers become quieter. Yet Pandora remains, not because she represents a simple warning, not because she represents only suffering. She remains because she represents humanity itself. The curiosity that leads us forward, the mistakes that teach us, the hardships that shape us, the hope that allows us to continue. The jar of Pandora was opened long ago in the world of myth, but every generation still encounters its own unknown vessels. Every person faces moments where the future cannot be seen, and every person must decide what to do next. Perhaps that is the true legacy of Pandora, not the suffering that escaped, but the strength that remained afterward. The night settles gently over the ancient Greek world. The mountains become silhouettes beneath the fading light. The temples grow quiet, and the voices that once filled the marketplaces slowly disappear into the distance. The gods of Olympus remain in the stories. The heroes remain in the songs. And the names of forgotten kings are carried only by fragments of stone and memory. But one name continues to be remembered: Pandora. Not because she was the strongest, not because she commanded armies or conquered kingdoms, not because she possessed the power of the gods who created her. She is remembered because her story touches something deeply human. You return one final time to the beginning of the myth. To the world before Pandora existed, humanity lived beneath the watchful eyes of the gods. Prometheus looked upon fragile creatures and believed they deserved the chance to grow. Zeus looked upon humanity and feared that too much power without wisdom could bring disorder. Between these two visions, the destiny of mankind began to change. Prometheus gave fire. Zeus answered with Pandora. And from that moment, humanity entered a new age. The ancient Greeks understood that every gift carried a responsibility. Fire could warm a family gathered beneath a roof of clay and timber. But it could also destroy a forest. Knowledge could build cities and create wonders. But it could also bring conflict. Curiosity could lead people toward discovery. But it could also lead them toward danger. Pandora's story held all of these truths together. She was not simply the cause of suffering. She was the beginning of awareness. The opening of the jar represented the moment when humanity fully entered a world of uncertainty. A world where people could no longer expect life to be simple. A world where every joy existed beside the possibility of loss. Yet within that uncertainty remained the greatest mystery, hope, the smallest gift, the quietest presence, the one thing that refused to disappear. Perhaps this was why ancient storytellers preserved Pandora's tale for so long. They understood that human beings are defined not by the absence of hardship, but by the way they respond to it. The Greeks lived through storms, wars, political struggles, and personal tragedies. Yet they continued creating beauty. They carved statues from stone. They wrote poems that survived thousands of years. They built temples that still stand beneath the modern sky. They remembered, and memory became a form of victory against time. This was one of the deepest connections between Pandora's story and human existence. The gods were immortal, but humans possessed something unique. Because human life was limited, every moment carried meaning. A conversation mattered because it could not last forever. A friendship mattered because time could take it away. A sunrise was precious because it would eventually become evening. Mortality gave meaning to life. The ancient Greeks understood this deeply. They did not imagine humans as weak because they were temporary. They saw humans as remarkable because they continued despite knowing they were temporary. Pandora's story also leaves behind a final question about Zeus. Was he a cruel ruler who punished humanity? Or was he a god attempting to create balance in a universe filled with uncertainty? The answer remains hidden. Perhaps that mystery is intentional. Greek mythology rarely offered simple judgments. The gods could be wise and flawed. Heroes could be courageous and imperfect. Choices could bring both blessings and consequences. The world of Greek myth was not a world of perfect beings. It was a world of complicated beings trying to understand their place within a vast universe. And perhaps that is why these stories still feel alive, because humanity has not changed as much as we sometimes believe. People still search for knowledge. People still fear the unknown. People still make choices without knowing every consequence. People still carry hope through difficult times. The jar of Pandora remains a powerful symbol, because every person eventually encounters their own version of it. A moment arrives when the future cannot be predicted. A decision must be made. A path must be chosen. And after the choice is made, life continues. The ancient Greeks looked toward the stars and believed the heavens carried the memories of gods and heroes. Tonight, as you imagine that ancient sky above the quiet mountains of Greece, you can almost see the same stars that watched over Pandora, Prometheus, and Zeus. The storms have passed. The temples have fallen silent. The old kingdoms have vanished. But the story remains. And perhaps that is the final lesson hidden within Pandora's journey. Humanity was never promised a life without sorrow. It was never promised perfect knowledge. It was never promised that every mystery would be answered. Instead, humanity was given something different. The ability to endure, the ability to remember, the ability to create meaning, and the ability to hope. So as the final fires of Olympus fade into the darkness, and the ancient world becomes quiet beneath the endless sky, the story of Pandora comes to rest, not as a tale of punishment, not as a tale of blame, but as a reflection of what it means to be alive. The world is uncertain, the future is hidden, the path ahead is unknown. Yet, somewhere within that mystery, something gentle remains, a small light, a quiet strength, a reason to continue. And as the stars slowly fill the sky above the forgotten temples and sleeping seas, you can leave the ancient world behind, knowing that the oldest myths were never only about gods. They were always about you, about memory, about fate, about the fragile, beautiful journey of being human. And now, as the night grows deeper, let the voices of Olympus become distant. Let the mountains become still. Let the ancient stories settle softly into the quiet darkness, carrying with them the final gift that remained after everything else was gone: hope.